Frindle by Clements. Chapter 3. The Question. The first day of school was always scared acquainted day. Books were passed out, and there was a lot of chatter. Everyone asked, "What did you do over the summer?" Period 1 through 6 went by very smoothly for Nick, but then came period 7. Mrs. Granger's class was all businesses. The first thing they did was take a vocabulary test to see how many of the 35 were for the week. The kid already knew tremble, circular, orchestra. The list went on and on. Nick knew most of them. Then there was a handout about class procedures. After that, there was a review paper about cursive writing, and then there was a sample sheet showing how the heating should look on every assignment. No laughter for 37 minutes straight. Nick was an expert at asking the delaying questions, also known as the teacher stopper or the governmentive time waster. At 3 minutes before the bell, in that split second between the end of today's classwork and the announcement of tomorrow's homework, Nick could launch a question guaranteed to sidetrack the teacher long enough to delay or even wipe out the homework assignment. Timing for was important, but asking the right question, that was the hard part. Questions about stuff in the news, question about the college the teacher went to, question about the teacher's favorite books or sport or hobby. Nick knew all the tricks, and he had even buried the Casper in the past. Here he was 5th grade, near the end of his very first language art class with Mrs. Granger, and Nick could feel a homework assignment coming the way farmer can feel a rainstorm. Mrs. Granger paused to catch her breath. Nick's hand shot up. She glanced down at her sitting chart and then up at him. Her sharp gray eyes were neither turned up to half power. "Yes, Nicholas." "Mrs. Granger, you have so many dictionaries in this room, and the huge one especially. Where did all those words came from? Did they just get copied from another dictionaries? It sure is a big book." It was a perfect grenade. Kapow! Several kids smiled and a few peeked at the clock. Nick was famous for this, and the whole class knew what he was doing. Unfortunately, so did Mrs. Granger. She hesitated a moment and gave Nick a smile that was just a little too sweet to be real. Her eyes were color of thundercloud. "Why, what an interesting question, Nicholas. I could talk about that for an hour, I bet." She glanced around the classroom. "Do the rest of you want to know too?" Everyone nodded yes. "Very well then, Nicholas. Will you do some research on that subject and give a little oral report to the class? If you find the answer yourself, it will mean so much about that if I just told you. Please have your report ready for our next class." Mrs. Granger smiled at him again, ever sweetly. Then it was back to business. Now, the homework for tomorrow can be found on page 12 in your Word Alive book. Nick barely heard the assignment. His heart was pounding and he felt small, very small. He could feel the top of his ear glowing red, and column complete shutdown, extra assignment, and probably a little black mark next to his name on the sitting chart. Everything he had heard about this teacher was true. Don't mess about with the lone Granger. Chapter 4. Word Detective. It was a beautiful September afternoon. Bright sun, cool breeze, blue sky, but not for Nick. Nick had to do a little report for the next day, plus copy out of the definition for 35 words for Mrs. Granger. This was not the way school was supposed to work, not for Nick. There was a rule at Nick's house: homework first, and that meant right after school. Nick had heard his older brother James groan and grumble about this rule for years, right up until he graduated from high school 2 years ago. And then James wrote them from college after his first semester and said, "My grades are looking great, because when I came here, I already knew how to prove first thing first." The letter was the proof Nick's mom and dad have been looking for: homework first. It was a lot from September to June. This had never bothered Nick before because he hardly even ever had homework. Oh, sure, he would look over his spelling word Thursday night, and there have been a few short book reports in first grade, but other than that, nothing. Up to now, schoolwork never spilled over onto his free time, thanks to Mrs. Granger. Those days were gone. First, he'll look up the definition to the brand new red dictionary that his mom had bought because Mrs. Granger told her to. It took almost an hour. He could hear a baseball game in John's yard down the street, yelling and shouting, and every few minutes the sharp crack of bat connecting with a pitch. But he had to do report for Mrs. Granger. Nick looked at the very front of the dictionary. There was an introduction to the book called Words and Their Origin. Perfect, Nick thought. It was just what he needed to do his report. It would all be over in a few minutes. Nick could already feel the sun and breeze on his face, and he went outside to play. Homework all done. Then he read the first sentence from the introduction. Without question this morning, American Dictionary is one of the most surprisingly complex and profound documents ever created. For it embodies unparalleled etymological detail, reflecting not only superlexical scholarship, but also the dream and speech and imaginative talent of millions of people over thousands of years. For every person who had ever spoken or written in English has had hands in it making. What? Nick scratched his head and read it again, and then again. Not much better. It was starting to feel like trying to read the ingredient on a shampoo bottle. He slammed the dictionary shut and walked downstairs. Nick's family did a lot of reading, so bookshelf covered 3 of the 4 were in the family room. There were 2 sets of encyclopedias, the black set for grown-ups and the red set for kids. Nick pulled out the D-balloon from the red set and looked up dictionaries. There were 3 full pages with headings like Ear Dictionaries, Word Detective, and Dictionary Today. Not very exciting, but he had to do. So Nick just popped down on the couch and read all of it. And when he was finished with the kid book, he opened up the black encyclopedia and read most of what it said about dictionaries too. He understood only about half of what he read. He leaned back on the couch and covered his eye with his arm, trying to imagine himself giving a report on all this boring stuff. He'd been lucky to have 3 minutes to verse, but before Nick was Nick, he suddenly had an idea, and it brought a grin to his face. Nick decided that giving that report could actually be fun. He could make it into something special. After all, Mrs. Granger had asked for it. Frindle by Andrew Clement.